right, I'll get right to it. I'm 24, female, and my cousin Lucy is 26, female. 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, specifically the hypermobile type. For those who don't know, it's a connective tissue disorder that affects your joints, skin, and blood vessels. It makes my joints super flexible, but also unstable. So I dislocate things constantly. I also deal with chronic pain, fatigue, digestive issues, and a bunch of other symptoms that make daily life pretty challenging. The diagnosis came after years of doctors telling me I was just anxious or seeking attention. So when I finally got answers, I was both relieved and devastated. Lucy was actually one of my biggest supporters during this whole process. She'd drive me to appointments when I was too tired, help me research specialists, and was always asking detailed questions about my symptoms and treatments. I thought she was just being an amazing cousin who wanted to understand what I was going through. She'd ask about my medication schedules, what my physical therapy exercises looked like, how my joints felt on different days, what foods triggered my digestive issues, everything. I was so grateful to have someone who seemed to really care and want to learn about my condition. About 6 months after my diagnosis, Lucy started posting more on Instagram and TikTok. At first, it was just normal stuff, but then she began sharing content about chronic illness awareness. I thought it was sweet that she wanted to advocate for people like me. She'd post infographics about invisible disabilities and talk about how important it is to support people with chronic conditions. Her follower count started growing pretty quickly, and she seemed really passionate about the cause. Then things started getting more specific. Lucy began posting about her own health struggles. She talked about joint pain, fatigue, digestive issues. She mentioned doctor's appointments and showed photos of mobility aids like braces and compression garments. The weird thing was, a lot of what she described sounded exactly like what I'd been going through. But I figured maybe it ran in the family. We do share genetics after all. And autoimmune and connective tissue disorders can have hereditary components. I started noticing that whenever we hung out, Lucy would ask even more detailed questions about my condition. She wanted to know about specific medications I was taking, their dosage, side effects I experienced, and how they made me feel. She asked about my physical therapy routines, what exercises helped, and which ones made things worse. She was curious about my dietary restrictions, which supplements I took, and even asked for photos of my medical equipment and braces. Again, I thought she was just being supportive and maybe dealing with similar issues herself. Her social media presence kept growing. She was posting daily content about chronic illness life, sharing tips for managing symptoms, and talking about the emotional toll of invisible disabilities. Her videos started getting tens of thousands of views, and brands began reaching out to her for partnerships. She was promoting everything from compression wear to supplements to adaptive clothing. The weird part was how quickly she'd become an expert on conditions she'd never mentioned having before. One day, about 8 months after she started her chronic illness content, I was scrolling through her TikTok when I saw a video that made my stomach drop. She was talking about her Ehlers-Danlos syndrome diagnosis, not just mentioning it in passing, but describing the exact same diagnostic journey I'd been on. She talked about the same specialists I'd seen, mentioned the same tests I'd undergone, and even described symptoms using the exact same phrases I'd used when explaining my condition to her. The video had over 100,000 views and thousands of comments from people sharing their own EDS experiences and thanking her for raising awareness. I felt sick. I went through more of her content and found months of posts about living with EDS. She was using medical terminology correctly, sharing detailed information about treatments, and even posting photos of mobility aids that looked suspiciously similar to mine. In some videos, she showed medication bottles, but the labels were always conveniently blurred or turned away from the camera. She talked about the same doctors I'd mentioned to her, described physical therapy exercises I'd shown her, and even mentioned specific supplements I told her about. The most disturbing part was how she'd built this entire online persona around my medical condition. She had partnerships with medical equipment companies, supplement brands, and chronic illness advocates. Her bio said she was an EDS warrior and chronic illness advocate. She was receiving donations from followers who wanted to support her medical expenses. I realized she wasn't just pretending to have my condition, she was making money off it. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wondered if maybe she really did have EDS and we both inherited it, but the timing was too suspicious. She'd never mentioned any symptoms until after my diagnosis, and everything she described matched my experience too perfectly. Plus, EDS diagnosis isn't something that happens overnight. It requires extensive testing and evaluation by specialists. If she'd been going through that process, I would have known about it. I decided to do some investigating. I started paying closer attention to her posts and noticed inconsistencies. She'd post about having a bad pain day, but then we'd hang out that same evening and she'd seem perfectly fine. She talked about joint dislocations but never showed up with any evidence of recent injuries. She mentioned being on specific medications that I knew required regular blood work, but she never mentioned any lab appointments or results. The breaking point came when she posted a video showing her doing physical therapy exercises. I recognized them immediately because they were the exact same routine my PT had designed specifically for my case. She was demonstrating them perfectly, which was suspicious because these weren't generic exercises you could learn from YouTube. They were customized for my specific presentation of EDS, targeting joints that gave me the most trouble. She even used the same modifications my therapist had taught me. I finally confronted her. I called her one evening and asked directly if she really had EDS. She got defensive and said, "Of course she did," asking why I would question her diagnosis. When I pointed out the similarities between our symptoms and timelines, she said that made sense since we were cousins and these things run in families. But when I asked for the name of her rheumatologist or geneticist, she got vague and said she preferred to keep her medical team private. That's when I told her I knew she was lying. I'd been tracking her posts and noticed she was using my exact experiences down to specific details I'd only shared with her in private conversations. I mentioned the physical therapy exercises and how they were too specialized for her to have learned anywhere else. She broke down and admitted everything. Lucy told me she'd started the chronic illness content as a way to gain followers and make money through social media. She'd researched various conditions but found EDS particularly appealing because it's often misunderstood and has a strong online community. When I got diagnosed, she saw it as the perfect opportunity to create authentic content using real experiences. She said she never meant for it to go as far as it did, but the money and attention were too good to give up. She'd been making around $3,000 to $4,000 per month through brand partnerships, affiliate marketing, and donations from her followers. People were sending her money to help with medical expenses she didn't have, buying products she recommended without trying, and following advice based on my actual medical needs, not theirs. She'd built an entire career on my suffering. I was furious and heartbroken. This wasn't just about money. She'd violated my trust in the deepest way possible. She'd taken my most vulnerable moments and turned them into content for profit. All those times I thought she was being a caring cousin, she was actually gathering material for her fake persona. Every detail I'd shared about my worst days, my struggles with doctors, my fears about the future, she'd packed it all up and sold it to strangers on the internet. The next day, Lucy showed up at my apartment with a check for $5,000 and what she called a business proposal. She said she wanted to make things right and offered to split the profits from her chronic illness content with me going forward. She suggested we could be partners. I could provide the authentic medical experiences and she could handle the social media side. She called it a commission arrangement and seemed to think this would solve everything. I stared at that check and felt disgusted. She was still trying to profit from my condition, just openly this time. The fact that she thought money could fix what she'd done showed how little she understood about the betrayal. This wasn't about lost income, it was about trust, privacy, and the fact that she'd essentially stolen my identity for internet fame. I'm completely lost here. I don't know if I should take legal action, though I'm not sure what laws she actually broke. Is this fraud? Identity theft? Medical impersonation? I know she violated my trust, but I don't know if what she did was actually illegal. Part of me wants to expose her publicly, but that could backfire and hurt the legitimate chronic illness community she's been pretending to be part of. And honestly, I'm worried about how this might affect our family relationships. I keep thinking about all the people who followed her advice or bought products she recommended based on my experiences. What if someone got hurt because they followed medical guidance from someone who doesn't actually have the condition? What about the people who donated money thinking they were helping someone with real medical expenses? And the legitimate advocates and patients she's been taking space away from in brand partnerships and speaking opportunities? At the same time, she is family. We grew up together. Our moms are incredibly close, and this would devastate them. Holiday gatherings are already going to be awkward forever. Is it worth destroying family relationships over this? Should I just take the money and move on? Am I overreacting because I'm hurt, or is this as serious as it feels? I haven't cashed the check and I haven't told anyone else about this yet. I feel like I'm living in some weird alternate reality where nothing makes sense anymore. Has anyone dealt with something like this before? What would you do? Am I wrong to feel as betrayed as I do, or should I try to see this from her perspective and find a way to forgive her? Update 1. I didn't expect this to blow up, but thank you all for the support. Reading the comments helped me see I wasn't overreacting. What Lucy did was seriously wrong. A lot of you suggested I consult a lawyer, so I did. The attorney specialized in fraud and social media law and explained that Lucy's actions potentially fell under fraud, false advertising, and even identity theft, depending on how she used my information. Since she profited off false medical claims, both civil and criminal charges were possible. The FTC also has rules about disclosure in sponsored content, and if Lucy hadn't disclosed that her content was based on someone else's experiences, that was another violation. The lawyer said these cases are becoming more common with the rise of social media influencing people faking disabilities or chronic illnesses for money and attention. My case was especially strong because I had medical documentation and proof Lucy had access to my information. While I weighed legal options, Lucy panicked. Instead of quietly quitting, she posted a video saying she was taking a break from advocacy. In trying to look legitimate, she fabricated details about her supposed doctors and treatments. That backfired. One of her followers, who actually has EDS and lives in our city, realized the doctor's name was fake. They dug deeper and found more inconsistencies and made a viral TikTok calling out Lucy's fraud. Within a day, people were dissecting all her content. The EDS community is tight-knit and does not tolerate fakes. Screenshots showed contradictions in her posts, and old Instagram photos resurfaced of Lucy doing things impossible for someone with the severity of EDS she claimed to have. By day 3, it was a full scandal. Disability advocates and influencers made content exposing her as an example of how fake advocacy harms real patients. Her follower count plummeted. Brand deals were cancelled, and even non-medical sponsors dropped her to avoid association. Lucy eventually called me, crying, begging me to defend her or at least ask people to stop harassing her. She said she was getting death threats and her job was at risk. Part of me pitied her. The harassment was extreme, but these were consequences of her own choices. What really struck me were the comments from people who had donated or trusted her recommendations. Some skipped medications to send her money for fake expenses. Others had bad reactions to supplements she promoted, thinking they were safe. One woman even questioned her own EDS diagnosis because Lucy's lies made her doubt her symptoms. That's when I realized this wasn't just financial fraud, it could have caused real medical harm. I chose not to make a public statement. The truth was unfolding without me adding fuel, but I did move forward legally. My lawyer sent Lucy a cease and desist demanding she delete content based on my experiences and return profits. We also filed FTC complaints about her undisclosed sponsorships and false claims. The family fallout was messy. My aunt called my mom after Lucy started getting tagged in cruel comments. My mom was shocked when I explained. At first, my aunt tried to defend Lucy, saying she must have been struggling, but after seeing the evidence, she was horrified. Lucy's immediate family stood by her publicly, but were furious privately. Her mom called to apologize and admitted they'd been misled. Lucy had told them her money came from lifestyle and beauty content, not fake medical advocacy. They're making her pay me back and covering her legal fees, but they're disappointed and embarrassed. Emotionally, it's been complicated. I feel vindicated that the truth came out, but guilty about the harassment she faces. I never wanted to ruin her life, only to stop her from exploiting my condition. But I also can't ignore the harm she caused real patients. I still haven't decided what to do with the $5,000 check. Part of me wants to donate it to legitimate EDS research. Another part thinks I should tear it up and let the legal process determine compensation. I don't want to profit from money gained through fraud, but I also don't want Lucy walking away without accountability. Update 2. Things have taken a turn I never could have predicted. When Lucy's fraud first blew up, disability advocates began using her case as an example, and soon major news outlets picked it up. A journalist from a national site contacted me about doing an interview on medical fraud in social media. At first, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go public, but after consulting my lawyer, we agreed it could help raise awareness. The article came out 2 days ago, focusing on the broader issue of people faking illnesses for profit, with Lucy's case as the centerpiece. It included interviews with victims, medical professionals, and advocates explaining why this kind of fraud is so damaging. The response has been overwhelming. I've gotten messages from people across the country, family members, friends, even followers, who had been scammed by fake influencers. Some wasted money on bogus treatments. Others sent donations to fraudsters. One person told me their sibling even faked a cancer diagnosis for a GoFundMe scam. Then yesterday things escalated. I was contacted by a private investigator working for one of Lucy's former sponsors, a supplement company. They suspect several of their influencers are involved in similar fraud schemes and said Lucy might be part of a larger network. The investigator asked for details about Lucy's methods and timeline, explaining that there may be organized groups coaching each other on how to fake medical conditions convincingly for profit. That possibility shook me. It meant Lucy might not have acted alone. She may have been trained, or worse, teaching others. I agree to cooperate because if this is bigger than Lucy, it needs to be stopped. Meanwhile, Lucy's own situation continues to deteriorate. Local news picked up the story, running a segment on social media, medical fraud, using her as the example. They didn't name her, but the details were clear enough. Her employer placed her on administrative leave pending review of her conduct. The segment also featured interviews with some of her former followers. One woman cried on camera, describing how she sent Lucy money while struggling to afford her own medication. Another said they followed Lucy's advice and ended up hospitalized after stopping a necessary prescription. Watching those stories broke me more than anything Lucy has said. Lucy tried to reach out again, this time through my mom, asking to meet in person. She claimed she wanted to explain and begged me to tell the media to stop covering the case. According to my mom, she sounded remorseful and was even considering therapy, but I don't believe her anymore. My lawyer warned me not to meet. Fraudsters often play the victim when caught, using excuses like mental health struggles. She said Lucy could easily try to manipulate me or complicate the case. Today, the private investigator called back with disturbing news. They uncovered evidence Lucy had indeed been in contact with others running similar scams. She was active in a private Discord server where people traded tips on faking illnesses, which conditions were easiest to portray, how to use camera angles to exaggerate symptoms, which medical props to buy, even tricks for making fake medication bottles look real. One message showed Lucy asking how to make joint hypermobility look convincing on video. Another revealed her bragging about how much money she was making. Worst of all, she wrote that using a family member's real medical history made her content more believable than others. That's when it hit me. She never cared about me or the damage she was causing. To her, I was just raw material for a profitable lie. That discovery changed everything. This wasn't a desperate mistake or a scheme gone too far. Lucy was an active participant in organized fraud. She deliberately exploited my condition because it gave her credibility. The investigator believes her group may have stolen thousands of dollars from vulnerable people. I've decided to fully cooperate with both the legal case and the broader investigation. If there's truly a network of people doing this, they need to be stopped before more people are harmed. I'm also considering sharing more of my story publicly to help others recognize the red flags of fake advocacy. The hardest part now is the family fallout. My aunt is devastated. She keeps apologizing and saying she doesn't understand how Lucy could go down this path. My mom is trying to balance supporting me while also being compassionate towards my aunt. But family gatherings are going to be strained for a long time. I never imagined that confronting my cousin about stealing my medical condition would unravel into exposing a whole fraud ring. It's terrifying to think what else investigators might find. But I'm determined to see this through. Too many people have been hurt for me to back down now. Update 3. I honestly don't know how to begin this update because the last few days have been absolutely insane. Remember that investigation I mentioned? Well, it exploded into something way bigger than anyone expected, and now I'm somehow in the middle of what's being called one of the largest social media fraud cases in recent history. The private investigator called me 3 days ago and told me they'd identified at least 12 other people involved in the medical fraud network Lucy was part of. These weren't just random people sharing tips. They had an organized system for recruiting new members, sharing authentic medical information stolen from friends and family, and coordinating their content to avoid detection by social media algorithms. But here's the part that made my blood run cold. They found evidence that Lucy and her group had been targeting other people like me. They had a whole system for identifying people with rare or interesting medical conditions, befriending them, gathering their medical information, and then creating fake personas based on their experiences. I wasn't Lucy's only victim. I was just one person in what they called their source network. The investigators showed me screenshots of conversations where Lucy and others discussed me specifically. They talked about how my EDS diagnosis was perfect because it's rare enough to be interesting, but common enough that they could find online communities to target. They even rated different medical conditions based on their potential for generating sympathy donations and brand partnerships. It was like reading about myself as a commodity instead of a person. But the most shocking discovery came when they traced the financial records. The total amount of money this network had fraudulently obtained through fake medical content was over $2 million across all their accounts. They had people donating to fake medical expenses, buying recommended products based on fabricated reviews, and even paying for personal consultations about managing conditions these fraudsters didn't actually have. 2 days ago, federal authorities got involved, apparently using the mail system to collect fraudulent donations crosses into federal crime territory, and several of the network members had been receiving checks and packages from their victims across state lines. The FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center had been tracking similar cases and was thrilled to finally have a solid lead on an organized network. I got a call from an FBI agent asking if I'd be willing to serve as a witness in their case. She explained that because I had documented evidence of how Lucy obtained my medical information and used it for fraud, my testimony would be crucial for establishing the pattern of behavior they need to prove conspiracy charges. I agreed immediately because at this point I just wanted to see justice done for everyone who was scammed. The agent told me something that really put this whole situation in perspective. She said that medical fraud on social media is estimated to cost victims hundreds of millions of dollars annually. But it's severely underreported because people are embarrassed about being scammed or don't realize what happened to them was actually a crime. Many victims are already dealing with serious health issues and don't have the energy or resources to pursue legal action. Yesterday morning, everything hit the fan. Federal agents executed search warrants on Lucy's house and several other network members across multiple states. They seized computers, phones, financial records, and boxes of medical equipment and supplies that had been used as props in fraudulent content. The local news was there filming as agents and carried evidence boxes out of Lucy's house, and by evening it was the lead story on every station in our area. Lucy was arrested along with 5 other core members of the network. They're being charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud, mail fraud, several other federal crimes. The potential sentences are much more serious than I expected. We're talking about decades in prison if they're convicted on all counts. Lucy's bail was set at $50,000 and her parents had to put their house up as collateral to get her out. The news coverage has been intense. Major networks are running segments about social media, medical fraud, using Lucy's network as the primary example. I've been contacted by reporters from newspapers, magazines, and TV shows asking for interviews. My lawyer has been handling most of the media requests, but I did agree to do one TV interview to help raise awareness about this type of scam. The response from the disability and chronic illness communities has been overwhelmingly supportive. Several major advocacy organizations have reached out to thank me for speaking up and helping expose this fraud network. They've told me that fake medical influencers are a huge problem that undermines legitimate advocates and makes it harder for real patients to be taken seriously. But I've also been getting pushback from some unexpected places. A few people have criticized me for going public with the story, saying I should have handled it privately within the family instead of destroying Lucy's life. Some distant relatives have been called to me at family events, clearly blaming me for the media attention and legal consequences Lucy is facing. The hardest part has been dealing with my aunt. She's obviously devastated about Lucy's arrest and the federal charges. She keeps asking me if there's anything I can do to help reduce Lucy's legal consequences, like testifying on her behalf about her character or asking prosecutors to consider a plea deal. I understand she's trying to protect her daughter, but I can't, in good conscience, help someone who orchestrated such an elaborate scheme to defraud vulnerable people. My mom has been trying to play peacekeeper, but even she admits she's shocked by the scope of what Lucy was involved in. When we first discovered Lucy was using my medical information, my mom thought it was just a stupid mistake that got out of hand. Now that we know about the organized network and the millions of dollars involved, she realizes this was serious criminal behavior that could have continued hurting people indefinitely. The FBI agent called me again today with an update that honestly left me speechless. They've identified over 200 potential victims of this fraud network across the country. People who donated money, bought products, or paid for consultations based on fake medical advice. Some victims lost thousands of dollars they couldn't afford. Others suffered actual physical harm from following medical guidance from people who had no real knowledge of the conditions they were pretending to have. One case that particularly bothered the agent involved a woman with lupus who stopped taking her prescribed medication because one of the network's fake influencers convinced her that natural supplements were more effective. She ended up hospitalized with a severe flare-up that could have been life-threatening. Another victim, an elderly man with diabetes, sent his Social Security money to help with someone's fake medical expenses and couldn't afford his own insulin that month. Hearing about these cases made me realize that my situation, while personally devastating, was actually minor compared to what other people suffered. At least I discovered the truth relatively quickly and didn't lose money or compromise my health based on Lucy's lies. These other victims trusted strangers with their financial security and medical decisions based on completely fabricated information. The legal process is moving faster than I expected. Lucy's lawyer reached out to mine asking about a possible plea agreement. Apparently, she's willing to testify against the other network members in exchange for reduced charges. My lawyer says this is common in conspiracy cases. The first person to cooperate usually gets the best deal. Part of me wants to see her face the full consequences of her actions. But another part thinks that if her testimony helps convict the other fraudsters and recover money for victims, maybe it's worth considering. I still have that $5,000 check Lucy gave me, and I've finally decided what to do with it. I'm going to donate it to the Ehlers-Danlos Society for research and patient support. It feels right to turn something that came from exploiting my condition into something that might actually help people like me. My lawyer says this won't affect the legal case since the check was given to me voluntarily. Looking back at this whole experience, I keep thinking about how different things could have been if I hadn't decided to investigate Lucy's posts more carefully. She and her network might have continued scamming people indefinitely. The thought that my willingness to speak up might have prevented other families from being torn apart or other patients from being exploited makes all the stress and family drama feel worth it. I never wanted to be the person who exposed the federal fraud ring, but sometimes life puts you in situations where you have to choose between staying quiet to keep the peace or speaking up to prevent others from getting hurt. I'm glad I chose to speak up, even though it's cost me some family relationships. and turned my life upside down. At least now I can sleep at night knowing I did the right thing. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.